Hey there, Aquarius. My name is Isaac. Welcome to my channel. We're going to get into your reading for the month of September of 2024. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle these cards. As I usually say in the beginning of my videos, these readings tend to focus around spiritual development and evolution, and moving beyond the ego and undoing conditioning and stuff like that, rather than typically love, relationship, soulmate kind of stuff that you typically see so often on YouTube. So let's get into it and see what we got. So we have the Hanged Man here, the Ten of Swords, Queen of Pentacles, Queen of Wands. These are almost all the same cards I just did for the Capricorn reading, even though I did shuffle the cards like 7 times. Prince of Pentacles, same as the Knight of Pentacles, and the Sun. And then also we have the Hermit and the Three of Swords. So right now you may be feeling a little bit restless. There could be, maybe you're in a situation you can't really get out of with the Hanged Man here. The Hanged Man has many layers of meaning, but one of them is the inability to control things and having to kind of just sit still. Being in a position where you can't really do much and you kind of just have to wait. But it doesn't have to be painful, but I think that in this situation you might be, the Ten of Swords, this is all self-inflicted pain. This is all thinking. So maybe you're stuck in a position. You can't really do a lot. You can't make things happen. You can't force things along. You can't, you can do what you can do, but you have no control over the outcome of any scenario or situation you might be involved in. And this is kind of the universe is kind of putting you in this position because it's making you kind of process out some attachments to, with the Queen of Pentacles and the Queen of Wands. There may be an attachment to relationships, or like particularly like attractive people. Like maybe there's a part of you that's like, man, I really just wish I could have a hot girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, but I can't make anything happen to do that. Maybe your job's not going great or something like that, or when some situation's happening in your life that's making it so you feel like you're not as going to be as appealing to another person, assuming you're single. If you're in a relationship, then maybe this could be a little bit different, or maybe it's kind of still the same thing where maybe you have a partner and maybe there's maybe an over attachment to this person, to where maybe when they're not around, or when you feel uncertain about certain things, you start to kind of question yourself. It's like your sense of that inner warmth, that feeling of peace, and just kind of being enjoying the present moment starts to go away. So whether you're in a relationship or not in a relationship doesn't really matter. But I think there is the universe is kind of putting you in timeout in certain ways and making it so you can't really change a certain situation, to force you to let go of your attachment to the. The Queen of Wands does mean many things. It's not just this, but I always kind of call it the hot chick of the tarot. So it's like there's just this attachment to like beauty. Like maybe you feel like if you can get a beautiful person to love you or pay attention to you, and beautiful people can choose anyone, really, right? Like a really, really attractive person can pick whoever they want. So if they pick you, then what does that say about you? It's like, oh, well, you must be really amazing. That makes me feel really good about myself. Oh, I must be worthy, right? But you're kind of in a position now where you're having to pull that back and realize that's not where self-worth really comes from. That's actually kind of rooted in insecurity. That's placing your happiness in the hands of a pretty person. um, and you really don't want to place your happiness in the hands of anybody, really, because it's not their responsibility. And if you place your happiness in the hands of another person, they will let you down, not because they want to, perhaps, but because they're not designed for it. That's not what they're there for. We have to we have to learn how to manage our own emotions, and then come to a relationship or whatever, from a place of being solidly rooted within yourself. But I think you're going to get through this a lot faster than you might be imagining. Sorry, I keep shaking the table here. It's really flimsy. I think you're going to get through this faster than you're thinking. Maybe you've kind of already been thinking about this and noticing this for a while. But the next phase here, we have the Knight of Pentacles. and the sun. This is like a revelation of a sense of self-worth, because really that's what the Knight of Pentacles kind of, he knows his value. He doesn't need to go chasing after anything. He knows that if he just puts himself out there because he's good enough, he knows he's good enough. He, she, whatever, but in the card is a man, so I'm saying he knows he's good enough and that he can just present himself as he is and just wait for people to recognize that worth and come to him. And this is a real, this will be like a, the sun is revelation, illumination, recognition of something that's been going on inside of you, something that just is suddenly comes to light. So I think you're actually going to break through this pretty fast. Whether or not that actually leads to you actually getting this person or situation that you may want. I just really get the sense that this is a lot. This is really focusing around like appearances. Like I said before, because our society really tends to elevate appearance above everything else. I mean, just go on Instagram for a while, and it just before long, the whole feed just starts to turn into pretty girls, pretty much. I mean, maybe unless you're not in, unless it's probably because your eyes start to linger on a few things, and the algorithm picks that up. So maybe if you're a woman or if you're into men, whatever, it could be the opposite. So if you find that that is happening to you, if you open up your Instagram and you scroll for a while, and you're starting to find that it's not so much the things that you started following anymore, and now it's just like a bunch of pretty people. This could be what we're talking. This could be you that we're talking about. Um, like I said, because we elevate this idea of appearance we equate that with value. We pedestalize beauty, physical beauty, and like I said, if you can get that beautiful person to like you, then what does that mean about you, right? Well, it might not really mean what you think it means. Um, and guaranteed that person, if you were to get, if you have like a crush on somebody you really want somebody that's like really beautiful, and you happen to actually get in a relationship with them, it's not going to actually make you happy. You may have 3 months, 4 or 5 months, you get used to each other, and it just becomes normal. Like everything else, anything that you have for a while just starts to become normal, and it stops being this like, oh yes, it's amazing, and it just normalizes. It doesn't have to turn bad, but it's not going to make you permanently happy. And there's this sort of maybe unconscious belief that maybe if you had that, then you'd be happier. But it doesn't actually have anything to do with anything. It's a temporary, it's like a drug that wears off eventually, and it can lead to a lot of problems. Especially, I mean, let's face it, because the society values beauty so much, people who are very, very attractive tend to not have to do quite as much inner work. They're not as required to develop their personality and subdue their ego, so they can kind of get this big. They can kind of become very arrogant and inflated, and might turn out to not be who you think they are, because you might be putting the blinders on. We very often, uh, both men and women, we very often will ignore red flags and personality issues because we're just so infatuated with someone for surface level reasons. And then once that honeymoon phase wears off and you start to realize, wait a second, this person is not really quite who I thought they were. So in order to avoid all of that and actually be able to maintain, I know I said I don't do relationship readings, and I feel like this is a little different. This isn't quite, this is ultimately at its core, this is about you recognizing your own inherent sense of self-worth. And then if you do decide to get into a relationship, then you'll be coming into it from a very independent place. You won't be dependent on this person in any way, especially like emotionally. You so and interestingly enough, when you start to really embody this sense of self-worth, this inherent worth, just based on nothing other than the fact that you exist, and just start to really relax into the present moment, which is what the hangman is ultimately trying to get you to do. That's when you start to manifest things in a way to where maybe you will attract that person. Maybe you will end up getting what you've wanted, um, but it will come to you in a different way, and you won't be dependent upon it, and you won't ignore the red flags if there are any, and you probably won't. They'll probably come to you. Actually, you won't have to put yourself out there. You won't have to put yourself. You won't have to chase, is what I'm trying to say. You won't have to go out of your way to try to get a person to like you. It'll just happen naturally, and then that'll feel even better, because then it's like you already know that you're worthy. You know that you're good enough, and then when somebody else comes along and recognizes that, It doesn't give you a big head. It doesn't give you an ego inflation because you're not relying on that thing or that person to make you feel special or to feel good about yourself. You've already got it. You've got a good, solid foundation, and from there you can actually have a happy, functional, healthy relationship. Um, and I think, like I said, this is going to come to light much sooner than you think, I believe. So if you are finding that you are kind of feeling restless or uncomfortable because of this desire for a partner, or if you're already in a relationship, this could be more just maybe bringing up, making it more apparent of that you might be a little bit codependent on your partner emotionally, for the reasons I described earlier. So it's kind of the same thing either way. Um, so the advice here, this is kind of an interesting combination of cards: the Hermit and the Three of Swords. Actually, you know what? I got to think about this for a second. Let me pause the video and look at this. Okay, I think I've got it here. So, as an Aquarius, you're probably very interested in, the spiritual side of things, the metaphysical side of things, the occult, magic, astrology. Aquarius is the sign of astrology. Um, and there may be a feeling or a worry that because you're so deep into this stuff that you're not relatable anymore, that you've become the hermit. You're just kind of the weird guy or girl living on top of the metaphorical mountain who's just super focused on all this sort of stuff that other people might kind of seem that, or you assume that other people think is weird. And then that causes this. And that's when you're like, I think that might be kind of maybe at the root of a lot of what we were just talking about, is this feeling of like, maybe I'm too weird for people to really like me the way I would want them to. Maybe this whole path of wisdom and whatnot is just too strange for some people, and it kind of makes me feel alienated. And but actually, that's not the case at all. That's self-imposed. That's you assuming that people are going to think you're weird, and then maybe you shoot yourself in the foot a little bit and prevent yourself from interacting with certain people because you kind of assume they'll just think that you're not their type, or that you're just too into this kind of metaphysical, spiritual kind of stuff. And so this is like self-imposed kind of suffering. And you may very soon come to realize that that's not true at all, that this is completely in your head, and that there are actually people, if you were to be a little more open about it and kind of not not really caring whether or not they care, they like you, or if they're gonna think you're weird, you know. Like, so just as a scenario, like imagine you meet somebody you're really attracted to, if you're single, and you're kind of starting to get really nervous, and you're kind of afraid to really like show them who you really are, because you're maybe assuming that they're going to just think that it's just too odd, and that you're just, and you're going to blow it because they're going to find out that you're really into this really strange, magical, esoteric kind of stuff, and then that's going to turn them off. And so then you start hiding that, you start holding parts of yourself back, and then you might come across as like awkward or kind of afraid or nervous, and that kind of like screws up the vibe between you, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whereas maybe if you would have just been open about it, because you don't care if anybody likes it or doesn't like it, because it's just who you are, um, you might find out that they're actually quite excited to find out about that, and they might actually really appreciate that side of you. So you kind of got to come out of the magical closet a little bit. Um, don't worry about people judging you. If they don't like you because you're into this stuff, then so what? I mean, you don't have to interact with them. And if it's like, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to miss out on this person that I really am super attracted to, well, there's many fish in the sea. There are many beautiful people out there for you to who will be more likely to want to spend time with you and like you. As much as people are loath to admit it, there is still some desire, and especially Aquarius. Aquarius people love to seem like they're detached and they don't care, but they do. I'm an Aquarius myself, and I understand how it goes. Um, that it may not. If you didn't care at all what anybody thinks, then there would be no need to repress this aspect of yourself, or beat yourself up, or feel like you need to try to chase anything down or anyone down in order to get them to like you. Um, so just embrace the weird and don't hide it. And if you scare people away, good. They weren't meant to be around you anyways. they're not on the same frequency level and they didn't really need to be in your life anyways. Whereas if you try to hold it back, you're going to hold back some key aspect of who you feel that you are, and that's going to come across weird. It's going to come, that's what makes it weird. It's when you think that it's weird and so you hold it back, that makes the whole interaction weird. And then you come across as weird. So it's kind of this like like I said, self fulfilling prophecy. It's a self sabotage thing that never would have happened if you would have just not cared in the first place. So it's like, oh, I don't want to be this I don't want to show them who I really am because they're going to think I'm weird. But then holding that back is what makes them think you're weird. So I'm going to pull a couple more cards and see what comes up here. And it's kind of funny. Like I said, I'm an Aquarius, and right now I'm actually sitting at the library in a study room. And there's this giant window right in front of me, and people keep walking by and looking at me doing these tarot readings and looking at me funny. And in the past, that might have made me uncomfortable, but I can honestly say it doesn't bother me at all anymore. So we have Judgment, the Prince of Cups, and Justice. So this goes a little bit deeper into something slightly different. It's kind of in the same vein, but Judgment, it's kind of like the recognition that something is out of your hands. It's like this angel is the one kind of responsible for whatever's happening. Like, so there are higher forces, there are beings, whether there be angelic beings or whatever tradition you might be interested in, or if your spirit guides, higher self, God, the universe, whatever name you want to give to this sort of guiding influence, this intelligence of the universe. Judgment is where you kind of surrender to that and trust that it knows how to bring you what you need better than you do. So, like I was saying before, this idea of like your sense of self-worth is kind of the foundation of your manifestations. It's your emotional baseline is kind of what's most responsible for what happens and what manifests in your life. And you're going through a process where you're learning how to trust entirely in that, trusting that your spirituality can actually take care of every aspect of your life. And people will try to tell you that's not true, but what do they know? So you're going through a process that's probably kind of painful and difficult. And what we talked about in this reading is part of that. The justice is the merciless sword that comes through and cuts things away that need, and it can be brutal. It's painful. It's like I said, it's merciless. It's intense. It's not mean just because it's not trying to just hurt you just for fun. It's necessary. But so if you find that you are in a situation where you're kind of stuck, you can't do much, you can't influence much, you're kind of just having to just kind of sit with yourself and deal with your thoughts and these kind of that Ten of Swords that we pulled up earlier. You've been put in this situation by higher intelligences that know better what you need to do than you do, and you don't need to try to control it. It's you're in a process, you're working through it, and the things that you really want the most can just kind of come to you and get dropped in your lap by synchronicity. And often you can find that you'll get things that are better that way than you could have if you tried to control it yourself. So going back to what we said earlier in the earlier part of the reading about this Queen of Wands, this kind of desire for affection from beautiful people, or like pedestalizing beauty that may have in the past made you feel like you need to chase after it or try to go out of your way or control certain things in order to get that, because you feel like maybe you don't deserve it just by being who you are. And then this is kind of suggesting to recognize that you can probably get something even better or someone even better just by sitting back and letting it come to you, by knowing your own value and and just being yourself, not holding that back, not hiding the more weird aspects of yourself. You can probably attract somebody who's even better than you ever imagined, better than you could find by going out and trying to force it to happen, going on dating apps and going out to clubs and bars and trying to be really particular about how you dress and how you come across to other people. You can probably find somebody much better for you just by being yourself and not really trying too hard than you can by trying really hard and trying to force it into being. But in order to accept that, you have to, like I said, embrace that sense of value who you truly are. Stop hiding your stranger side from people out of a fear of rejection. Anyways, I think I'm going to wrap it up here. So if you want to get into a private reading, just contact me. Information's down below. hit like, subscribe, check out the other videos, leave comments. I've done a series of astrological videos for September as well, so go check those out. And until next time, take care.